Hello students, today we will be discussing the topic developmental tasks. The objectives of this lesson are to learn about the different stages of development, to describe the developmental course in each stage, to become familiar with different concepts related to human development, to understand different characteristic patterns of behavior in each developmental stage. Society plays a very important role in the overall development of the individuals. Each and every society has its own demands and expectations from children at different stages of their development. The codes and expectations vary from culture to culture, and the child learns these at different stages of his or her development. The society aims to transmit its expectations to its members. These social expectations are known as developmental tasks. Some tasks are the same for everyone, and this is regardless of where we live, primarily because of shared human biology. For example, crawling and walking are the same across all the societies. However, there are some tasks that vary across cultures. For example, enrolling the name of the child in school varies in different countries. The idea of developmental task is generally credited to the work of Robert Havighurst, which was published in 1972. Havighurst defined developmental task as a task which arises at or about a certain period in the life of an individual, successful achievement of which leads to his happiness and success with later tasks, while failure leads to unhappiness in the individual, disapproval by society, and difficulty with later tasks. From this definition, we understand that developmental tasks have a profound impact on the person's adjustment and success. The three main useful purposes of developmental tasks are: firstly, they act as guidelines to make parents and teachers aware of what children should learn at a given age and what will be expected of children. Knowing that a youngster of a certain age is encountering one of the tasks of that period, for example, learning an appropriate sex role, helps the adults to understand a child's behavior and will encourage them to establish an environment that helps the child to master those tasks. Secondly, developmental tasks serve as motivating forces for children to learn what the social group expects them to learn at that age. Thirdly, developmental tasks reveal to the individual about what happens in the further stages, and hence the person is prepared to act accordingly. So in sum, developmental tasks act as expectancies as to what must be achieved at each stage of development. Children who are quick at mastering developmental tasks are rewarded by social approval. That is, their achievements put them in line for leadership roles. They also benefit from self-approval as they develop self-confidence and strong motivation to live up to social and self-expectations. On the other hand, the failure to complete developmental tasks has three serious consequences. Firstly, it makes the child feel inferior, and this can lead to unhappiness. Secondly, it results in social disapproval, which is accompanied by social rejection. So, for instance, babyish or immature behavior from a teenager would lead to disapproval from peers as well as adults. And finally, the failure to complete developmental tasks can also make the mastery of new developmental tasks difficult. Robert Havighurst's developmental task theory talks about different problems faced by people in all stages of life, and he explains them really well. We are all aware that biological aspects have some kind of effects in our development. Similarly, psychological factors and the society can also play a role. According to the biopsychosocial model, the first source corresponds to the biological factors, the second to the psychological aspects, and the third to the social factors. Havighurst's framework takes into account these multiple dimensions and accordingly identifies three sources of developmental tasks. First are the tasks that arise from physical maturation. These include learning to walk and talk, to be able to control bowel and urine, to behave in an acceptable manner to the opposite sex, and to adjust to menopause. Next, we have tasks that arise from personal values. Examples of these include choosing an occupation and figuring out one's philosophical outlook. Thirdly, we have tasks that have their source in the pressures of society. For instance, we are required to learn to read and we are expected to be a responsible citizen. Havighurst classified developmental tasks into two categories. In the first are the tasks which have to be completed within a certain period of time. And the second category includes those tasks that continue for a long period, perhaps even for a lifetime. Therefore, it is critical that the tasks should be completed during the appropriate stage. Otherwise, it would result in failure to achieve success in future tasks. According to Havighurst, there are 6 major stages in human life. The first stage is of infancy and early childhood, which ranges between birth and 6 years of age. Next, we have middle childhood, which ranges between 6 and 13 years of age. The third stage is of adolescence, where we are looking at teenagers aged between 13 and 18 years. Then comes early adulthood, consisting of adults aged 19 to 30 years. And then we have middle age, 30 to 60 years. And finally, we have later maturity, which consists of old adults who are aged 60 years and over. Each of these 6 stages have developmental tasks given by Havighurst, and we will now discuss them. During infancy and early childhood, that ranges between birth and 6 years, the infant and the child must learn to walk, start to crawl, learn to take solid food, and start to talk. The child, as he or she grows, must learn to control the elimination of body wastes, must understand sex differences and sexual modesty, must get ready to read and form concepts and learn language in order to describe social and physical reality. Middle childhood is the stage between 6 and 13 years of age. And here the child must learn physical skills that are necessary for ordinary games, must learn to get along with age mates, and must build wholesome attitudes towards oneself as a growing organism. Children of this age must also understand the appropriate masculine or feminine social role, and they must develop concepts necessary for everyday living. Children during middle childhood develop conscience, morality, and a scale of values. They achieve personal independence and they develop attitudes towards social groups and institutions. During adolescence, that ranges between 13 and 18 years of age, the teenager or the adolescent should achieve new and more mature relations with age mates of both sexes, must develop a masculine or feminine social role, must accept one's physique and use the body effectively, and must achieve emotional independence from parents and other adults. Adolescents also must prepare for marriage and family life. They acquire a set of values and an ethical system that acts as a guide to their behavior, and they must desire and achieve socially responsible behavior. Early adulthood is the stage lasting between 18 and 30 years. Here, the young adult must select a mate, learn to live with a partner, start a family, bring up one's children, manage one's home, get started in an occupation, take on civic responsibility, and find a congenial social group. During middle age, which ranges between 30 and 60 years, the adult should assist his or her teenage children in becoming responsible and happy adults. He or she must achieve the adult social and civic responsibility and must reach and maintain satisfactory performance in his or her occupational career. The middle-aged adult must develop adult leisure time activities. He or she must relate himself or herself to the spouse as a person and must accept and adjust to the physiological changes that accompany middle age. The middle-aged adult must also adjust to his or her aging parents and cater to their needs. Later maturity is the last stage and relates to persons aged 60 years and older. They too must achieve some developmental goals, and these include adjusting to one's decreasing physical strength and health, coping with retirement and reduced income, and adjusting to the death of one's spouse. Old adults must establish an explicit affiliation with their age group, and they must adopt and adapt to social roles in a flexible way. And finally, they must establish satisfactory physical living arrangements. And examples of these could include living at home on one's own, living at home with one's children, or living in a care home. We will now examine how the characteristics of different developmental stages influence the achievement of developmental tasks. To do so, we will look at three principal stages. First, we have infancy and childhood. Second, we have adolescence, and the third stage is adulthood. We will now discuss these stages in detail. The first stage is infancy and childhood. During infancy, which ranges from birth to 18 months, babies are fully dependent upon adults for meeting all their needs. They do not differentiate themselves from their parents, and they gain a sense of themselves by taking in their caretakers' feelings about them. Children aged 18 months to 3 years are very active, and they move back and forth between wanting to be independent and also wanting the security of their parents. So you would see that children of this age would like to be left alone so that they can move around and explore their environment, and at the same time they may also end up crying so that they can return to their parents. Children of this age become frustrated easily, and their frequent tantrums are an expression of that frustration, as well as their lack of communication abilities. They do not want to share things. 4 to 5-year-old children are very active and they ask a lot of questions. How, why, when, how long? And these are questions that are meant to help them understand the world. They can be quite resistant to their parents' instructions as they experiment with the dynamics of power in relationships. Children of this age also like to be involved in many different activities, and they begin to be quite social. Children aged 6 to 11 years also ask a lot of questions as they gather information about the world and how it works. They are very interested in rules and why they exist. They want people to obey rules even though they themselves may not necessarily abide by them. They may test rules, disagree with them, break them, or try to set rules as they learn to internalize the rules. They use their more mature reasoning abilities to understand the values that underlie the rules. They also learn to differentiate between wants and needs. Along with the exploration of rules and the beginnings of a cooperative spirit, games become prominent in these children's play. 6 to 11-year-olds are eager to learn new skills, including social skills. The next stage is of adolescence. The major task during adolescence is to create a stable identity for oneself and to become complete and productive adults. Adolescents find their role in society through active searching, and this can lead to discovery about oneself. We will now see the developmental tasks that enable adolescents to create an identity. The first task relates to achieving new and more mature relations with others. Physical maturity plays an important role in peer relationships. Adolescents who mature at a slower or faster rate than others will be dropped from one peer group, and they will usually enter a peer group of similar maturity. For early maturing girls, entering into a peer group of similar physical maturity can mean a greater likelihood of early sexual activity. The next task relates to achieving a masculine or feminine social role. Adolescents develop their own definition of what it means to be male or female. However, most adolescents do conform to the sex roles of our cultural view, wherein males are expected to be assertive and strong, while females are seen to be passive and weak. It is not that everybody demonstrates these characteristics at the same proportion, but they definitely would show individual differences in these characteristics. The third task is of accepting one's physique. The beginning of puberty and the rate of body changes for adolescents varies tremendously. How easily adolescents deal with those changes will partly reflect how closely their bodies match the well-defined stereotypes of the perfect body for young men and young women. Now we look at the fourth task, which is of achieving emotional independence from parents and other adults. Adolescents deal with their emotions independently, and this helps them move towards self-reliance. Adolescents derive this strength from internalizing their parents' values and attitudes. The fifth task is of preparing for marriage and family life. Sexual maturation is the basis for this developmental task, and it is not usually fully achieved until late adolescence or early adulthood. The sixth task in adolescence is of preparing for an economic career. In our society, an adolescent reaches adult status when he or she is financially independent. The seventh task is of acquiring a set of values and an ethical system that acts as a guide to one's behavior. This means one has to develop an ideology. Adolescents' abstract thinking and hypothetical deductive reasoning help them to develop their own set of values and beliefs. The final task in adolescence is of desiring and achieving socially responsible behavior. An adolescent defines the world from his or her new social role once he or she becomes a member of the larger community through employment, and this gives them financial independence. Simultaneously, they also gain emotional independence from their parents. As adolescents become independent, they must also learn to be responsible for their behaviors and actions. We now look at the third stage of development, adulthood. The 6 adult life tasks we are going to discuss include, firstly, identity. Prior to entering the adult world, it is important that the adolescent achieves a sense of what Erik Erikson termed as identity, which is a sense of one's own self. The task of living with another person in an interdependent, reciprocal, committed and contented fashion for a decade or more often seems neither desirable nor possible to the young adult. But as they grow and mature, they understand that intimacy and commitment can go along together. The next task is of career consolidation. The mastery of this task involves expanding one's personal identity to assume a social identity in the world of one's work. It permits the adult to find a career that is both valuable to the society as well as to him or her. Next is the task of generativity. This involves a broader social circle through which one manifests care for the next generation. So if you would have noted, as we develop from childhood to adulthood, there is a shift from the focus on the self to a focus on social groups. Generativity reflects a different sort of capacity, the ability to be in relationships wherein one cares for those younger than oneself while simultaneously respecting the autonomy of others. Research shows that between the age of 30 and 45 years, the need for achievement declines, interestingly, and the need for community and affiliation increases. Next, we have the task of being the keeper of the meaning. This task involves passing on the traditions of the past to the next generation. It is epitomized by the role of the wise judge, as the focus is not just on bringing up one's children, but is also on conservation and preservation of the collective products of mankind. This includes the culture in which one lives and its institutions. Becoming a keeper of the meaning allows one to link the past with the future. The last of life's developmental tasks is integrity. It entails the task of achieving some sense of peace and unity with respect both to one's own life and to the whole world. The virtue of integrity is said to be wisdom. Erik Erikson described integrity as an experience which conveys some world order and spiritual sense. There are a number of factors that aid the mastery of developmental tasks. We'll now discuss them. First, we have accelerated physical development. Faster development of physical ability than normal allows the child to engage in more advanced tasks. Second is strength and energy above average for age. Having higher level of strength and energy compared to children of the same age will be useful to undertake a wider range of activities. The third factor relates to above average intelligence. High intelligence equips one with the potential to develop skills traits and abilities faster and more effectively than should be possible. Next, we have an environment that offers opportunities for learning. An enriched environment which provides all types of facilities will be a strong motivator to achieve and master the developmental tasks. The fifth factor relates to guidance from parents and teachers in learning. Guidance, advice and all sorts of help from parents and teachers will aid the child in learning novel skills and also pursuing difficult skills. Next, we have a strong motivation to learn. A desire to learn will instigate the child to do something and explore new areas. And finally, we have creativity accompanied by a willingness to be different. Producing something that is both original and worthwhile, and simultaneously having the courage to be different, adds the winning streak to the child. As such, creativity can be an asset in achieving developmental tasks. Likewise, we have some factors that hinder the mastery of developmental tasks, and we will now discuss these. First is retardation in developmental level, whether physical or mental. Problems during the critical periods of development or growing up in an environment that is impoverished hinders holistic development. Second is poor health resulting in low energy and strength levels. A child with a lot of health problems will experience lowered strength and energy level. Next, we have a handicapping physical defect. A handicap in physical development has a negative effect on physical as well as mental growth. Next, we have lack of opportunity to learn what the social group expects. A child who lacks facilities and exposure to different skills and concepts may not be able to prove himself or herself according to the expectations of others. The fifth factor is lack of guidance in learning. No proper guidance from elders will delay learning. The sixth factor is lack of motivation to learn. Children who have to be constantly forced to learn may not be sufficiently motivated, and this may be due to environmental factors such as lack of support, or may be resulting from problems such as learning difficulties. The final factor we are looking at is the fear of being different. In order not to be separated from one's group, children at times may not display their unique skills and abilities. Hence, they must be encouraged to pursue their talents. In conclusion, it is important to ensure that positive forces of development are facilitated while negative factors are reduced to the extent possible. Each and every society has some expectations about the overall development of individuals from birth to death. These expectations are called developmental tasks, and they vary cross-culturally. Robert Havighurst proposed a comprehensive developmental task theory, and we had discussed this in detail during this lesson. Different developmental tasks are associated with each life stage and are influenced by a number of factors like physical, cultural and personal aspects. The achievement of developmental tasks affects the adjustment and success of the individual. While several factors aid the achievement of developmental tasks, there are also some factors that prevent their mastery and achievement. Physical, psychological and social aspects can act either as accelerators or as deterrents in achieving and mastering the developmental tasks.